Welcome to today's explainer. Now, right off the bat, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to completely forget everything you've ever been taught about starting a business. Literally, throw it out the window. Forget the bank loans, forget hunting down angel investors, and definitely forget this outdated idea that you need a massive pile of cash just to get your foot in the door. Today, we're going to explore a concept that acts as a literal cheat code to wealth creation. It's a highly effective blueprint that allows you to generate massive cash flow without risking any of your own upfront capital. We call it the missing gap strategy. And to truly understand the sheer power of this framework, we've got to start with a number that would make most people just give up entirely.
Negative $100,000. Just let that sink in for a second. Imagine waking up every single morning, checking your bank app, and seeing that you are $100,000 in the red. This isn't just a stressful financial hiccup, right? This is the kind of crushing pressure that brings on severe panic attacks. And you know what? This was the exact terrifying reality for entrepreneur Adnan Saani. He was drowning in debt, his back was firmly against the wall, and all the traditional avenues of wealth creation were completely closed off to him. Yet, from this absolute rock-bottom position, he managed to engineer one of the most incredible financial turnarounds imaginable.
Okay, let's dive into this because this is where this story gets incredibly fascinating. From that six-figure deficit, Adnan went on to build a sprawling portfolio of over 70 highly profitable Airbnb listings across Africa. But here's the absolute kicker. He did all of this without actually owning a single one of those properties. No way, right? He didn't buy the land, he didn't secure massive mortgages, and he definitely didn't pour millions into construction. So how on earth do you build a real estate empire when your starting balance is deeply in the negative and you don't actually own any real estate? Well, the answer lies in completely rewiring how you view business. Section 1, the capital myth. You don't need money. For generations, society has basically drilled this specific phrase into our heads. You need money to make money. But when we actually sit down, analyze the data, and look at the most resilient success stories out there, we find that this is fundamentally untrue. Capital is not a physical requirement for starting a business. It's a mental roadblock. It's an excuse that keeps highly capable people paralyzed on the sidelines. When you firmly believe you need money to start, you blind yourself to the leverage you already possess. Just look at the stark difference between a traditional business model and the missing gap model. The traditional route is incredibly heavy and painfully slow. You take on massive loans, you buy heavy machinery or mountains of inventory, and then you essentially cross your fingers and hope for the best. It's a huge liability trap. The missing gap business, however, it's incredibly agile and entirely asset-light. It doesn't require a bank's approval. It relies on just two simple human traits: razor-sharp observation and the ability to connect a problem with a value-driven solution. Section 2, spotting the missing gap. Opportunity is local. I want you to turn the lens back on your own life right now. You don't need to fly to Silicon Valley or hire some fancy consulting firm to find your starting capital. Your starting capital is quite literally sitting outside your window, hidden in plain sight, right on your own street. Adnan Saani says it best. If something is missing in your community, that might be your business idea. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the biggest mistake people make is looking for these complex, revolutionary, world-changing ideas. When in reality, the most profitable businesses are simply local community problems disguised as opportunities. The pain points that annoy your neighbors every day? That's actually a roadmap to your first cash flow. Let's break down this secret playbook for spotting the gap. First, you've got to pay close attention to daily frustrations. What are people always complaining about in your town? Listen to them. Second, identify what is physically missing. Is there a specific service everyone has to drive 40 minutes just to access? Third, look for deep inefficiencies in existing services. Maybe a business exists locally, but their customer service is absolutely terrible, or their booking process is a nightmare. And finally, you must internalize that the opportunity is right where you live. You don't need to invent a brand new technology. You just need to be the person who finally steps up to bridge that local gap. Section 3. The physics of value. Redefining worth. This right here is the absolute core mechanic of wealth. When you find a problem that people are desperate to have solved, you naturally create high perceived value out of thin air. You don't need a factory to create value. You just need to remove a friction point from someone's day. But to truly leverage this, we need to redefine what value actually is. So the crucial point is this definition right here. Value is entirely a human perception placed on a good or service, completely independent of its physical makeup. Money is just a tool we use to transfer this perceived value.
If you understand how human perception works, you start to realize that people aren't paying for the physical materials you offer, they're paying for the feeling of having their problem solved. To put that into perspective, consider this brilliant analogy from the financial sources we reviewed. Compare an average, run-of-the-mill gray rock to a piece of gold. Inherently, from a purely physical standpoint, gold is just a shiny yellow rock. It doesn't actually have more inherent objective worth than the gravel on your driveway. But as a society, humans have collectively agreed to place a massively higher perceived value on the gold simply because of its rarity and its shine. The worth is entirely in our heads, not in the rock itself. And the exact same psychology applies to massive businesses today. Think about Apple or Gucci. A Gucci handbag doesn't cost 100 times more than a generic handbag from a department store because the leather is magically 100 times stronger. It costs more because of the perceived value of the brand and the social status it provides. Steve Jobs created massive perceived value through elegant design and simple convenience. If you can figure out how to create this kind of perceived value in your local community by solving a missing gap, you absolutely do not need a massive injection of cash to start earning. The value you provide literally becomes your currency.
Section 4. Validating your local demand. Test before spending.
Okay, so you've spotted the gap and you understand the value you can provide. But how do you actually test this without risking your own money? Well, you need a rapid, frictionless validation phase. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how to do that. Step 1, you spot the gap. Step 2, you validate the demand fast before spending a single dime. How? You just ask people. You set up a simple, free online listing offering the service to see if anyone bites. You act as the middleman just to see if the market actually exists. If people say yes and are willing to pay, only then do you move to step 3, turning that local problem into a profitable, scalable solution. You let the customer's money fund the creation of the business, not your own hard-earned savings.
Section 5. Scaling without owning assets. No ownership needed.
Once you've validated the demand, the ultimate secret to building a massive empire without taking on massive debt is separating control from ownership. Let's move to and see how this builds into Adnan Saani's incredible story, bringing us completely full circle. You do not have to own the asset to control the cash flow. Adnan noticed a missing gap. Property owners had empty homes they didn't know how to monetize, and travelers needed high-quality places to stay. He simply stepped right into the middle. He offered to manage and list those properties on Airbnb, taking a percentage of the profits. The property owner gets their problem solved, the traveler gets their problem solved, and Adnan generates massive, scalable cash flow without carrying the crushing liability of a mortgage. He leveraged other people's assets by simply being the missing gap that connected supply and demand. This asset-light approach is absolutely vital because, as we learn from the profound insights in the psychology of money, getting rich and staying rich are two entirely different games. The goal isn't just to make money once by taking wild, highly leveraged risks. The goal is to never worry about money again. By utilizing the missing gap strategy and scaling without heavy asset ownership, you are playing the ultimate game of financial defense. You protect yourself from the heavy, capital-intensive risks that routinely bankrupt traditional entrepreneurs, which allows you to survive long enough for compound growth to do its heavy lifting. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, undeniable truth. The blueprint is right here in your hands. You do not need a bank loan. You do not need a massive inheritance. And you certainly don't need anyone's permission. You simply need to open your eyes. So I'm asking you directly, with absolute conviction, what local problem are you going to profit from tomorrow? Look around, find the gap, and claim the value that is waiting for you.